YouTube, it's Brian Phillips here. We have this beautiful AT-6 1.5 meter, which is interestingly a 1.2 meter lineup. Ask Horizon about that. Got the manual here. We're gonna start building this thing, and it's gonna be done in no time. Our unboxing did take 3.5 days. We shortened the video significantly. All right, so when you get a Verizon Hobby plane, what you wanna do is open the book. Sometimes it's really nice. They'll actually put it on the first page like this. And sometimes it's like back here somewhere in the other languages, okay? In our case, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and just peruse the manual, and we are gonna make sure that there's not something that jumps out on us. Like this thing. So we have this strange thing that's like now in the way of getting to the manual. And it says something about, evidently they must have called out the wrong bolts in the manual. So I guess since there's really only one screw in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't really know. There's 3 here, and then there's 5 of these. But this addendum is gonna be hopefully good enough to get the job done. I think it just pertains to the screws that go in here. So it should be pretty straightforward. But I don't understand why it's so hard to make a depiction of the correct screw, guys. Look at this. This screw here is what they're depicting. And look, it's all long and everything in this drawing, but then it's like super short here. I don't know, that's confusing to me. Come on, Horizon, get your stuff together. All right, so come over here, please. So we've got, this is gonna tell you all the setup for your radio. Flight timer is 4 minutes, good Lord, that's shorter than I expected. And so basically what we've got here, guys, this tells you the general setup. This will get you up in the air, get you started. It talks about the weight, it talks about the CG location, which happens to be 92 through 98 millimeters back from the leading edge of the wing at the fuselage, okay? I want you to notice something, guys. This is true for many, many wings, okay? This is at the fuselage here, okay? Is this or is this? I don't know, it's not super clear. Maybe there'll be a drawing somewhere. So when you guys ask a question on YouTube like, hey, where's the CG? If it's listed in the manual, that's where it is, I guess. I don't know. When I fly for the initial flight, then I'll know where it actually sits. Typically Horizon's really good, but the only thing I don't like about that description is like, are they talking here at the wing root, at this like wing box area, or do they mean here? I think they mean here, but I don't know that. And the thing is, it's a fairly good amount back. So it's like almost 10 centimeters back. So anyway, I usually just look over this, make sure there's nothing weird. It looks like the wing installation comes actually after the tail installation. That's fine with me. Oh, and then computerized transmitter setup. This is the other thing that you want to just check on here. The stuff that I normally do, this I don't worry about how much play there is. I do the computerized radio setup. And it tells you right here what you got. Like I've got a DX18, okay? So if you had something smaller, then you could set it here. Keep in mind, it's very important that you guys understand this. When you use Safe Select, the way I understand it is you can share a channel for assignment with flaps or landing gear, for instance. But in my opinion, especially when I was learning to fly, I wanted safe on all the time. There was never a time I wanted safe off. If you're buying this plane and you're learning to fly with it, maybe not the best move, but still, when could you get a plane like this and learn to fly? I mean, there's never been a time in history. It's so cool because they're beautiful and you can learn to fly. But I wouldn't recommend it, especially now with the tail dragger with a really short, narrow, I mean, it's gonna want to tip over a lot. So you'll see, especially if you're flying off the grass. So that being said, when you set up your settings, you have to keep in mind you're going to need a channel to activate that if you want to keep it separate from all the rest of your channels. So you have throttle, elevator, rudder, ailerons, and then flaps and landing gear. And then of course you would somewhere in the upper range, you would have your safe select, okay? So safe select would be assigned to like 7, okay? So we've got 5, 6, 7. So 7 is where you would usually do that. So 7 would be auxiliary, it's either auxiliary 1 or auxiliary 2. It's auxiliary 2 on mine, because, well, actually that'd be auxiliary 1, because gear would be the top one. Either way, we'll get to that at some point shortly. I just want you guys to understand that you do have to actually give up a channel is the best way to do it. You can share the channel, but I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so the other thing too is it looks like everything else here is about the same. You can fly this thing on 2200 3S, 30C pack. I'm going to probably be going with a 3000 milliamp. That was top of the range they recommended. I do have a 5000 milliamp. I bet it would handle. It's got a very big wing. So, and then of course the safe select switch designation will get in there. Now here's the drawing, guys. Remember we were talking about the CG? There you are, right there. So they actually do show it in not so uncertain terms, okay? That's one thing Horizon does a really good job of this. Typically, you get a model, you're lucky to get a number. And sometimes it's crossed out with Chinese language and then written in handwriting. Okay, cool. So it looks like everything else is about the same. I did get the plug-in fly, or I got the bind and fly, but they offer this as a plug-and fly. If you guys are doing a plug-and fly, good luck. It's not really that hard. You only have one flap servo, so that's kind of nice. You don't even need a Y cable for that. I don't know if I pointed that out in the unboxing, but we just got one flap servo with a linkage that comes down to mechanically interlocked 3-panel network of split flaps, which is really cool, and it's super nice detail. Some of the paint bridges between the plastic and the foam, but the thing that's kind of nice about this is because it's got such a simple paint scheme, it's very clean. And you know, like even the control horns, they have a gray on gray or gray on silver instead of like a black or a white or a clear. I think it matches nicely. And then the wheels are simple, which is cool. I think it looks good. And then of course the panel lines are wonderful. So the build on this is going to go pretty quick. I think I'm just going to dive in. I've already got this out of the bag, so I'm going to use it. You're going to have a carbon fiber spar. I happen to have 4 tail feathers because they sent me 2 of the same size, so I'll have some spares, provided I crash right. And then the way this works on most of the Horizons, you just slide that through on one side or the other. It doesn't really matter which one. And then you pretty much just walk one side in, and this side it slips in really nice. Some of these have been super tight. This one fits in super easy, but I mean, granted, there's like no retention whatsoever. So I'm just going to slip that in there, and then the second one's going to go on the other side. And the only thing I want to refer to in the manual is whether or not there's some tape or something that they're wanting us to use. And it says 2 10mm screws. Of course, in this case, they send the addendum. The addendum says 2 6mm screws. So what we'll probably do is we'll go ahead and grab a tape measure so we can just confirm that real quick. So now, the reason I was so concerned about the fasteners being the only thing is because they include these, which are tape that they've cut out, and it's really super strong, and they gave me 4 pieces. So I'm assuming they want us to go ahead and use that tape to help hold on the horizontal stabilizer, and then of course you've got your screw. Now you could opt to do that or not do that, or you could use your own tape. Okay, without further ado, we have a ruler that's in metric and standard, and it does appear that these are in fact 6mm screws, 6mm length, and so of course the drawing shows what would look like something like a 1.2 centimeter. So I don't know why they show them twice as long as they should be. I always am a big fan of actual size for things like this, especially when you have an addendum to correct a confusion like that it was 10mm before and now it's 6. So anyway, so we're going to get these screws ready to rock and roll. One thing to keep in mind when you do an assembly like this is that if you use cheap Chinese screwdrivers, you may tend to have a chance at stripping out your screws really easy, but if they design them to work with their cheap Chinese screwdrivers, you're usually okay, okay? So I'm just gonna go ahead and do it without any tape for now. If I was so inclined to tape this wing or glue it, maybe with some mucilage would be a good option. I'm sure it would help. In fact, I'll probably go ahead and tape it on the bottom. Now, you notice I did it this way just because it's easier. And then these will go together. And of course, we have to slide this in. And they're suggesting that we go to the bottom hole. That's probably fine, but I'll start there and then I'll adjust it back. You want to show them how I do this? I have to level mine. Mine was at a little bit of an angle. It's no big deal. They have a carbon fiber insert here, but that's not glued or maintained anyway. So what I might do is I might push this back just to kind of make it less visible. And then when I get the canopy off, I can adjust that further. I'm going to slip this rubber hose back, and then I'm going to have that prepared and ready to go by opening this. So just opening it, super easy to do that. Some of the cheap Chinese stuff is not quite so easy to do. Now you'll notice that I've already screwed in from the other side, so I may actually, nope, I didn't have any problems. I was thinking maybe I'd have some problems. And then this just all slides in together. It's not really hard. And to be perfectly honest, you really probably don't need any instructions on this part. It's so stinking simple. As you can probably imagine, a lot of this build is just the, you know, like, hey, I've got this beautiful plane. I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to get hanger rash on it. And being that it's foam, you'll notice I stuck a piece of the packaging here because my wonderful camera crew decided to knock it over immediately upon coming around the counter. So as you can see, this is working fine. So what we can do is I'm actually going to pop the canopy because that usually gives you a nice flat spot. And I gotta say, guys, I'm gonna probably put a piece of tape on here. I know it's not as pretty, but these little plastic things, what happens is you get in there and you work so hard at it that you'll put a bunch of wrinkles into the foam, and I just hate the way that looks at the end of the day. So at this point I can slip this back, and what I'll do is I'll just take this piece of foam and I'll support it because this is just a sharp edge here. So it's gonna ding the foam super easy, so you want to be super careful when you deal with it. And my first step is going to be to, in fact, I might try. No, I think we're okay. I think we're actually okay. We might do a towel. We'll do a towel or a blanket or something. Okay, so as you can see, I got a blanket. This particular blanket, I may or may not have run a prop and chopped a hole in. So that would be a step you could avoid for good measure. Oh, by the way, show me the adjustment over here. This is really cool. They did a much more easily accessible adjustment for getting to the tail dragger assembly. The tail dragger assembly right here is actually protruding from the side. So when the rudder actuates, this actuates as well. But what we can do is we can undo this set screw and make our adjustments. That's pretty cool. I'm excited to hopefully never have to adjust that. Okay, so now one thing I want to warn you about too while we're at this step is these things, you have to be careful that when you actuate the control surface, this sometimes will bind up against your control arm. So when that happens, it creates an excessive load on your servo. Well, it can. It's usually not a big deal because you're not going to keep the elevator cranked all the way back the whole flight. Unless you're like totally off on your CG. Okay, so you see what I'm doing here, guys? I'm just going to plop that on there real quick like. Boy, that's super clear. You can't even tell it's there. That must be why they put the backing on it. And I'm just going to do these right here and right here. And then I might actually wrap that leading edge at the front of each horizontal stabilizer. By the way, guys, these models, I gotta say, they're turning out some really pretty models. And Horizon does a good job. They do a very good job. It's annoying to me that they forgot to put both sides in. But depending on how awesome this flies, I'll probably forgive them at about, what, like in an hour or so when I see how awesome it flies. And the truth is, this thing's going to be done. All right, guys, so now we need to put the wing on. And the wing is, I mean, about as easy as it gets here. We've got a couple of Y cables that are tucked into this little cavity here, and that's it. I mean, that's all you got to do is just stick it on there. So I'm sort of nervous to say how easy it's going to be, because what if it doesn't go well? But look, I mean, it's on there. So I'm pretty sure we're going to use the other screws for this, since there's only one other type. And it looks like in typical Horizon fashion, they've given us one extra of each style of screw. And I kind of wish that most of the manufacturers would adopt that principle. It's always easier to send an extra screw, and cheaper, actually a lot cheaper, than have to go back later and add that into something to be shipped out, in my opinion. So we're gonna try to get those screwed in right now. It looks like I was hiding my one screwdriver. Okay, yeah, sometimes these things don't like to take a full-size screwdriver, but actually they do fit. Number 2 fits perfect in there. A little Craftsman standard number 2 Phillips screwdriver fits all the way down there. And these things will turn for like 6 or 7 years. So when you're doing it, if you use a drill, I'm just warning you right now, it's already tight. You can hear the crushing of the foam when you get it tight, okay? But just so that you don't have to wonder if we like time lapse this, because it'll be a super short video, I bet. I'm just gonna do it live and in charge here. Here we go. Oh wow, look at that. Guys, this thing is like almost built. That's probably the fastest build I've ever had in my radio controlled airplane experience. This may be almost as fast as a UMX. Open it up and fly it. It's not that fast, but it's pretty close. Okay, we still got to do radio setup. But I mean, seriously guys, look, I mean, the plane is together. It's built. Like, what are the chances of it being that quick? That's awesome. It looks sweet. You gotta put the canopy on so you can see how awesome it looks. Wowzers. Ooh, yeah. That looks good. I like it. Looks really good. And we even went the extra mile with the tape. I mean, that took some time. So now our next step is going to be to probably pick up this mess, and then we'll do radio setup. So, all right, guys. So there's one more step that I want to talk about, and that is identifying your CG ahead of time. This plane has a low wing, so you aren't going to balance it like this, but you could hypothetically balance it like this. Most people balance a low wing like this, okay? Now, I don't really care which way you like to do it. You can do it either way. I don't care. The thing is going to balance. It's the same way. But I want to show you how I do it, okay? So I've got my ruler. It's very simple. If you have a complex wing shape, sometimes it's easier to cut a piece of paper, and then you can cut it to the exact start and stop point. So this wing it's got the normal shape, so you're gonna have a hard time putting a ruler down on top of it. So why don't we go ahead and use some paper, and we'll show you that method. All right, guys. So this is basically my packing list for the part that they forgot to send me for extra excitement. And I'm just going to take and lay this down, and I'm going to measure out how long it needs to be. It's supposed to be between 92 and 98 millimeters, okay? So 9.2 centimeters right there, and then 98 centimeters would be here, okay? So if we look at these two markings, then we can transpose those. Now we look at this drawing, and it shows that there is, the measurement comes from right at the front of the wing. So I know it's kind of hard for you to see here, hon, but usually the first thing I do is I look for a landmark that's already there. But as you can see, it would have been way too easy. You could call this circle. This must be like a fuel cap or something. And so normally I do a dot here and a dot here, and that's all the more to it. Now, you're thinking, Brian, you just put dots on your plane? Yes, I did. And you're gonna really love what I do later, and that is, once I kind of establish where I like it to be, I'm gonna put a drip of glue or two. And then I can feel it with my fingers as I have it held up. Now you're probably also thinking, but Brian, you're not actually measuring to that correct CG point because you're following the curvature of the wing. And you would be correct. And I don't care. You know why? Because it's a warbird, okay? I'm gonna tend to fly it a little bit nose heavy anyway. So this is just a starting point, guys. It's not gonna be our final decision, you know, it's, once we fly it the first time, we're probably gonna find out it's a little bit different for us. Or we like to fly it a little bit different than that. That's the rationale behind the simple, quick, get it done marks, okay? Not because I'm in a hurry to fly, because I didn't have the parts sent to me correctly the first time. Has nothing to do with that. Maybe a little. So the other way I do it is I will take a piece of tape and I'll slap a piece of tape now over my marks, and I will actually literally take a piece, a little bit of drip of CA, and I will use a little bit of kicker, and then I just set it up, and that's all there is to it. And then I can feel the bump. And when I go to flip this upside down, you have to have everything in, including your flight pack, also known as your battery, and then you can go ahead and balance it, okay? So we'll get there very, very, very shortly. So now that we're done with that, we can go back to the page where we have to do our setup, okay? So we have the quick start information, center of gravity, we have our flight time for 4 minutes, so now it's time for some radio setup, guys. Got our DX-18 here. If you fly with the lanyard, pull the lanyard off. Why, Brian? Because if you catch a propeller with a lanyard and you pull it off on the ground and you break it, you'll feel really dumb. I haven't done that yet. All right, let's show them how we do this. We're gonna film here and here, guys. So power's on, turn on your radio system. Comes up, something like this. Scroll down to system setup. Yes, that's gonna disconnect your RF. That's what that little light is. Model select, scroll over to the bottom, add new, create. Okay, model type. We want it to be an airplane. Data will be reset, yes. Okay. Model name, acro, okay. Model number 55. Usually what I like to do at this point is I come out to the main screen and make sure everything looks right. System setup, yes. Model select all the way down. We're definitely on acro, okay. Then I can go to model name. I'm gonna scroll in the name, take the time, put the name as it would appear in the way you want. So it's AT-6, AT. Every time I scroll, I can click the clear and it will advance to the next type. See what's happening, guys? There we go. So we're special characters. So it's an AT-6. Okay, AT-6, and now I'm gonna put the size. The size class is gonna be 1.5 meters. Okay, 1.5 meters. All right, guys, so we're at 1.5, and then we'll throw in an M, okay? 1.5 meter. Now, the reason I do that is because when you get a glorious new plane, you're thinking, there's no way I would ever get a UMX of this plane. And then you realize as soon as they offer one, you immediately get it. And then you're thinking, no, there's no way I'll ever get a bigger one. I love this one so much. And then you'll do that too. So just put it in there. You'll need it. All right, so the next thing you're gonna wanna do is just keep going down here. Channel assign you'll mess with later. The rest of these things I don't worry about. I just have some of them preset for everything else. Like the bind area, that's kind of handy, but I'm not even gonna probably mess with that now. So I'll just go back out to the main menu. Once it comes up, you can click and you can scroll down. You can see all these different settings. This is where you're gonna go ahead and do some of your initial settings to meet the demands of what they tell you here. So in my case, computerized transmitter setup, I've got a DX-18, so I'll be on this box here. Okay, so DX-18, it looks like go to the system setup, airplane, got it. Wing type, one tail. Oh, that's right, we forgot that, guys. So we'll go back over to system setup, disconnect the radio, go to the aircraft type, and we're gonna change wing from normal to one aileron, one flap. That just means one channel and one channel, okay? And then the tail's normal. Now I'm gonna go one step further, and I'm gonna change this ugly acro plane, and I'm I don't know if they have an AT-6 in here, but I'm gonna look. It looks pretty close to, it's probably somewhere between the T-28 and the P-47. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be a P-47. But yeah, it looks like we're into the jets and stuff. So yeah, so really we're probably just gonna set her to that. That's pretty close. And I like that because then you end up with this plane that helps you to, you know, like, if you couldn't see what the plane looks like, it would help you to know. You'd be like, okay, is that right? Is this the same? I think it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
This has got to be the plane. And then you can just immediately fly. All right, so the other thing is different dual rates and expo. So dual rates meaning the amount of output on your sticks. They're not telling you anything here about that, but they do tell you about that a little bit here. They're saying in high rate and low rate, they want this much deflection on the ailerons, this much deflection on the elevator, rudder, and flaps, and I'm not gonna screw with that. So I usually go in here and I assign all of these at the switch. I go move it to switch F. Now I know some of you take, you don't like the way I set this up, so you could just, like when you set it up, you could just set it up different, okay? I know that's kind of a tough principle. But we're gonna go to the top setting and I'm gonna set my expo to like 30% on the rudder, okay? Which is a lot. And I'm gonna change my dual rates down to like, oh, we'll just do like, say 90%, okay? Then I'm gonna flip my switch and then I'm gonna put my expo, leaving the dual rate at 100. That means that you have 100% throw on the rudder in this case. I'm gonna set it to half. And then I'm gonna set the initial setting to, why don't we do 10? We'll do 20, and then we'll do 40, okay? So what that does is that means that each step of this switch is going to change the controllability from crazy to what I think I wanna have to, oh, it's really slow. So, if you set it like that, what that does is that gives you the immediate ability to get your plane to the ground by going, whoa, I need way more expo, or it's too tame, I need more control. You always have that step. Then after the maiden, you make your adjustments to the middle, and you set the middle, and then you set a lower setting that's gonna give you more sensitivity, and then you set a higher setting on expo that's gonna give you less sensitivity. So you can always respond to your environmental condition. So now we're gonna go back in, we're gonna do the same thing on aileron. We're in the highest expo setting in my opinion. So we're gonna go to 10, we'll set it to the middle, we'll set it to 20. And just in case you guys have ever seen me set up a plane, I pretty much set them all up this way if I'm not immediately inclined to do something different, which doesn't typically happen. Okay, so we're in the lowest setting. I try to do it in the same order so I don't make a bunch of mistakes. Obviously, I'm doing this on camera, so more mistakes will be made inherently. So I'm gonna go to 40, and then I'm actually gonna back off my dual rates down to 90. I'm gonna switch back to aileron. The top setting, I'm gonna set that to 40 and 90, okay? So basically what that means is, and people ask me this all the time, it's extremely hard to explain this in text, okay? That's why you have a picture here. So you see how as I move my stick on the aileron, see how there's that little X moving? It moves through the range. This is showing you how much impact you're gonna have. Now when I change the setting, you can see how it changes the position of the little X, okay? So what that means is that if this is neutral, and then this is full stick, okay? And let's say you put 50% expo, okay? Halfway through the sweep, let's call it, it's gonna be moved about 25%. So somewhere between here and all the way, you're gonna have all the way still. The full deflection's the same. It's just the space from 0 to minus 100 or plus 100 on the stick position is gonna deflect. It's gonna be slowed down in the middle of the range. It's hard to explain, you have to fly it to know it, okay? Once you've flown once with expo, you'll be like, ah, it all makes sense. So that being said, now just apply that to all the controls and really confuse yourself. That's why I set them all the same, and then I make my major change on my maiden flight. That's why maiden flights are a bad representation of the capabilities of an aircraft. And yet everybody wants to watch the maiden flights because they want to know how it's going to come out of the box, guys. This thing is going to fly a lot better on a second or third flight, no matter who you are. All right, cool. So that being said, timer, 4 minutes, guys. We're going to walk out of the dual rates and expo, and we're going to go down here to timer. I like a 1 out timer, especially on a warbird. You're not going to be doing a lot of gliding with this plane. Over 25%, I want my 1 time active, and I want a tone and vibrate, okay? So what that means is when I move my stick over 25%, it starts the timer counting down, okay? When I put it below 25%, it keeps running. Now, if you had a timer that was not active for 1 time, I'll show you what that means. You move the stick up, it starts counting down. Once you drop below, it stops counting, okay? Which is kind of nice. If you're using a glider, it really does help. The timer is a lot more effective, but I've always found my flying style is such that when I go, I pretty much go, okay? So I will make my 1 out timer for the duration of the flight to get my voltage to a safe landing level, okay? That being said, you can always land early, but on a 4-minute flight time, you're probably not gonna be landing early. All right, so another thing too, real quick thought, make sure you're charged when you do your maiden flights, guys. It does make a difference, okay? Don't go out there and fly it on 6.7 volts, because it's gonna, like when this thing gets to low voltage, it's done. It's gonna warn you and you'll be able to maybe land. So just charge this thing. I have a pretty good sized battery in here, so I'm lucky I don't have to go out and buy a bunch of AA's. You've never heard me say that before in any of my 1,000+ videos, but it is a very good point. I probably should have said it. All right, so what else do we have in here? We have a flap system set up. Looks like we need to go to the servo setup and reverse the gear, servo setup, so we'll go travel, sub-trim, reverse. Now I'll scroll over to where it says gear and I'll switch it. So that means gear, which is A by default in most conditions on a DX18. That's going to be reversed like they recommended. Now the flap system is going to be set to switch D if you like that sort of thing, which I don't. I'm going to actually set it to switch B like I always do. So I'm going to scroll down to flap system. I'm going to change it from inhibit to B. I like B, I don't like D. I don't like taking my fingers off of the sticks to hit this. Now, yes, you can get to it, but you'll be hitting C before you know it. So why not just have it here? If you use pincer grip, fine, go for it. I'm not a pincer gripper, I use my thumbs. So, all right, the way you set this up is there's 3 positions on this switch. You get 3 designations for flap and then the respective elevator correction, okay? There's also a speed, which is gonna deploy, think of it this way, 100% of the throw for that time period. So if it's set to 1 second, it's gonna take 1 second. Not, if you're set to 25%, it takes 1 second. No, if it's 25% of the throw, it's gonna take a quarter of a second to get to that position. So that's confusing. And the other thing is you have to keep in mind that if you have it set, if you're overdriving the flaps from like 100 to 150%, then that time is for the entire sweep, okay guys? So if you're plus 50 and minus 50 extra, so you're minus 150 plus 150, whatever it is, so you're going 300 units, it still takes the full time to move through that range, okay? All right, you're never gonna be that tight on adjusting these things generally. The sequencer, yes, not on flaps. All right, I'm set to B, position 0 is 100%, okay? And yes, if you're doing a plug-in fly, don't ask me which way to set it. You just have to guess and check until you get it right. And then 0, of course, is gonna be neutral. And then position 250, you'll notice that we're going from a higher number to a lower number. It just depends on which direction the servo travel needs to go. It doesn't really mean much of anything. It's more of an absolute value. Then we're going to minus 25. So that tells me that we're not using the full sweep of the servo. So there's a possibility we could do a little bit more deployment on this, which is kind of cool. And then the speed they're recommending at 2 seconds. Okay, and then they're saying 4% up elevator for the takeoff flaps. And it looks like 6 for the landing. Okay, so what's gonna happen is as I deploy my flaps. They'll go down. It's going to take 2 seconds for the full travel. So if we're set from 100 to 50, it's going to take approximately a quarter of a second to move, okay? Then it's going to take a little bit more than a quarter second to go to the landing setting. And you're also going to have the elevator is going to go with it, okay? Like this. That's going to help stop the plane from ballooning up. Which sounds funny because the flaps are going down. Why wouldn't the plane go up? Or it doesn't do that. It changes the airfoil shape, so it kicks the plane like this. But it produces more lift, and so you go up. All right, anyway, back to the point. That's everything, guys. That's all the settings. So now it's just time to go ahead and bind it. All right, so we have, the most important thing. I can't believe they don't include this in the manual, but throttle cut. Come over here and let's look at this. So we go back to our system setup. I just got to click my scroller to do that. You'll go into throttle cut, inhibit. You're going to set it to whatever you like. I prefer H myself. You see how it says -130? If you set it to -130, good luck with that. You'll probably have the prop start when you shut that off. So set it to -100 unless you're doing a gas motor and then you want to kill it. So that's why you do that. All right, so that's switch H and you want it to be in your preferred position. So in this case, you can go back to monitor mode and you can see whether the throttle is moving. Throttle is not moving, okay? Now when I turn off my throttle cut, you can see it is moving, okay? So that's how you tell. My throttle cut is on, okay? Radio is off now. Turn it off. We're going to be binding this next. Binding the plane is super duper easy, but we have to bind it in a special way because of the safe select. And so we have to read a little bit, so we'll read a little bit. I got a 3S 3000 milliamp. This is a 30 through 40C discharge. I have a XT60 connector on here, and obviously an XT60 is not going to agree well with this connector here because it's an EC3 connector, okay? Now that being understood, I have always got a ton of adapters that go from virtually any type of battery that I've ever owned or my buddies have owned, and it will take this battery and it will make it into an EC3 end, okay? EC4 end if you were going into a bigger pack, okay? So we'll just slip this in here temporarily. It's not like we're trying to CG the plane. And then of course we'll go ahead and plug this in. Now, of course, the safest method is always to take off the prop. We're not going to do that. We're just going to throw caution to the wind, except we are going to give a little bit more height for prop clearance, and we're going to turn it away from our body. Worst comes to worst, we'll chop up our wife's Afghans a little bit more. Okay? So, power's off. Throttle cut's on, that's important, okay? Now, we are gonna get a bind plug. The plane comes with a bind plug. If you don't know what a bind plug is, I'll show you right now. Of course, this stuff is discussed in the manual. You can watch my awesome video or you can read the manual. Manuals are written in English from Horizon Hobby, not Chinglish, actual English. This is a bind plug. It says remove before use. Yeah, duh. Okay, so that's gonna slide into the receiver. The receiver is in here, okay? This is an AR636A. That's the model number. There is a protective film over the top of that. Okay, you see that, guys? That's how you know you got a new one. I'm gonna throw that away. And then I'm gonna take this, and it's keyed. It's got a little key on either side. It's got a little, it's an angled flat spot. And then I'm gonna slide that in. Goes in easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It says BND/PRG, so bind program. You can program that receiver if you buy the programming cable, okay? So now let's read a little bit, and then I will tell you how to bind for safe select or how to bind for regular. So what you're gonna wanna do is go to the English page 7 if you're reading English. This is where they talk about caution, taking off the prop, blah, 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 all that stuff, but they don't talk about a throttle cut, which is hilarious because that's probably the most important safety rule in RC is a throttle cut. That and chopping the throttle when you crash, they do mention that, by the way. This product requires a Spectrum DSM-2, DSM-X compatible. This is both. You can downgrade from DSM-X to DSM-2 if you decide you can force this to go DSM-2. be careful, some flight fields won't let you use DSM-2. So, because it doesn't handle the spectrum as well as DSM-X, it can handle more different planes on the spectrum. So, anyway, keep going. So this is binding procedure. Switching on, safe, select. Binding procedure. Switching off, safe, select. See this little diagram here? That's what you're looking for. Install bind plug. Put it in bind mode by turning it on. Remove bind plug, then bind. That's if you want safe on. If you want safe off, you just stick it in there like normal, and you bind it, and then you remove the bind plug. We're gonna do it this way, okay? So, the first thing we wanna do, since our radio is off, that's correct. We have the bind plug in, we have the throttle cut on, which isn't gonna mean anything's not bound yet. We're gonna plug this in. I want you to see this, if you can kind of shine over here, maybe. Yeah, my cables are kind of not cooperating very well right now. Okay, so watch how this thing starts flashing, okay? All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna hold our bind switch, except we wanna remove the bind switch, or the bind plug, okay? The bind plug is removed. That means we're gonna have safe select. Holding it down, stay about 1 meter away. Can you see the light flashing in the background if I do this? Okay, so this is on. Holding down the bind switch, it says binding AT-6, DSM-X 22 milliseconds in telemetry. So we've got it. I can let go. Everything's gonna start coming to life. You hear it beeping? All right, so first things first. Elevator, rudder, ailerons. First thing I always do is I first check. Roll, roll, and I move my body like a dork, okay? You see this? Like dork? Ugh. I do that because it's helped me out of some trouble. I have crashed planes straight out of the box. My grandpa built one and I crashed it immediately because I had stuff reversed. Now, this is the part where you want to go ahead and hang on to stuff in case the throttle was not working. Throttle cut is working. It's been confirmed now, okay? Clear the throttle cut. It's off. Now I can just make sure things start moving. They move, and they move quick. Okay, throttle cut's on. Test it again. Timer's cleared. Okay, so we're safe to go ahead and test the next control surface, which is going to be gear. I now have a certain level of confidence. I'm not going to like trust my important bits to the prop, but for now, gear up, gear down. Oh yes. Oh, yeah, baby. They don't sound real hot, but they're fine. You see what I was talking about now about having short landing gear? They are definitely that. Okay, one disadvantage to safe select, guys. Come look at this servo. Go around here and look at the servo. Look at this. Do you see that servo, guys? Do you see the screw, how it's not turning on center? See how the rudder turns closer to center? It may not be so bad, but I'm a little bit nervous about that. And I'm actually going to come in here with a screwdriver and just tighten this. Except that didn't do very well. I'm going to get a sharper screwdriver and I'm going to try it again, okay? Oh yeah, that's better. That sounds horrible. Jeez. Okay, so you see this? They went and tried to tape my antenna down. The tape didn't hold, and so it was getting in close to that. That's not good either, okay? And then why are these things, are these like not glued on purpose, or what's the deal? That's kind of weird. I know what they're there for. They're to take the wiggle out of that carbon fiber rod. Okay, so now this is what they mean by checking. You can check the deflection on that first page where they show the amount of deflection here. This is where you could go in and confirm how much you're deflecting. Okay, I found that that's somewhere between watching an unboxing video and watching a setup video. So it's probably a huge waste of time. All right, so now the other thing is I want to put this canopy on so that I don't want you to not see how awesome it looks, because it really does look pretty good. Okay, so flaps. Let's see if we get a low shot of the flaps. Okay, so that's our normal flight, takeoff, landing. Oh, it's gorgeous. It looks so cool. See this, guys? Sometimes you'll get that with split flaps that are articulated by one servo. See, this one doesn't want to quite go all the way back up. I'm not going to complain about it because in flight, it's just going to get pushed right back where it belongs. Okay, so now there's another test you can do, which is going to be pertaining to safe select, okay? We still have to make our assignment on which switch we want to actually control that. The other thing is, I want to show you something. When you pick this plate up, look where your hand goes, okay? Right into wheel wells. So it makes it awkward, so you need to be careful when you're collapsing your gear. You're going to have to be really careful because this part, it gets crushed super easy. Kind of wish there was some extra thought put into that, if possible. Okay, cool. So now safe select is important to know what switch it's on. I'm going to designate D as my safe select switch. So you notice I stuck it back down in a safe spot, made sure my throttle cut's on. I'm going to go back to the page where we talk about safe select. All right, so safe select is going to be important. Before assigning your desired switch, ensure that the travel for the channel is set to 100% in both directions, not 150% and not less, okay, guys? Bind the aircraft correctly to activate safe select. This will allow the system to be assigned to a switch. Did you notice what I just said? You have to assign it still. It's not going to be on, I don't think, by default. Yep, it's not actually trying to do safe right now. It's just AS3X at the moment because we already gave it throttle, which would have initiated it. So what we have to do now, safe select is assignable on any unused channels 5 through 9. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to this menu. This is our flight mode monitor, and I'm just going to watch. Okay, so it looks like we're going to be on aux2. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is go down to system setup. The RF's going to be disconnected. First time on a plane, I usually hang on to it, make sure the prop doesn't take off. So now I'm going to scroll down here to channel assign. I'm going to go to aux2. aux2 is set to aux2, which is fine. I'm going to go ahead and make the designation in the next menu. aux2 is set to E by default. I'm going to set it to D. Now, why D? The reason I set it to D is, okay, I have two modes. I either set my stabilizer with this, or I set my gear channel for safe because it's very easy to get to. So one or the other, it's always one of those two. That's the only time I deviate from that. The crescendo, I think I have maybe some fancy stuff in there too. So even then, no matter how fancy my setups are, I always try to mimic the same exact switch locations, okay? All right, so what we have to do to actually do the safe select is we have to go like this, and then we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Did you see what just happened? So it did the dance. Now we may have to switch the direction of travel to get this the way we want, okay? So my normal flight mode for me is when I have this all the way up. All the way down would be the abnormal position, so safe on. This would be safe off, okay? Safe is not on. Safe is on. See, it's trying to level. Easiest way to tell if safe is on, look at the ailerons. They're both pointed like they're trying to roll the plane level. Find the middle. Make it do the dance. It goes from full deflection. It finds the quickest route to level. Now look at the rudder. The rudder is going to try to level the plane too, okay? See that rudder move? That's stabilization. It's trying to move. I don't know if you can see that. Can you come over here and stand where I am?
Oh,
you'll see it.
yeah.
And then the elevator, you can see the elevator is trying to correct the level. So I'm going to turn it. It's going to try to point the nose back up, or it's going to try to point the nose back down, okay? Now watch the rudder. Can you get the camera angle right here? Right here. Look down there, and you'll see what's going on. Watch this. You got to follow the plane, hun. I don't think this is going to work with two people. Okay, watch the rudder, guys. You see it kind of walking back and forth? I'm not actually... Is anybody seasick yet? Do we need to take a break? Okay. So what I'm trying to get at is that AS3X operates in addition to SAFE, sensor-aided flight envelope. Okay, so that's trying to level the plane. SAFE's off, now we just have a regular AS3X. If you flip this over and you find halfway up, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to try to correct for wind. You can kind of see that rudder move there. Okay? All right, so we're all set. The only thing we've got to do now is try to work out CG, and we'll be ready to literally put it up in the air. Of course, it's stinking windy out. I don't know if you guys noticed that, which is too bad. What we are going to do, though, is we'll go ahead and pop this off. You see why that's not very fun? Getting that canopy off is going to be a pain. So I think I should do the tape thing. This is ridiculous. And you slip and it hurts your fingers. I'm going to go right here. I'm just going to put another piece of tape right now. Okay. You didn't even make it through the build series without a mod. All right, so this is about as simple as it gets for a mod. Put the tape on there where it's not going to be seen, okay? Then do your verification that it's going to be at the right angle. And then I'm just going to take and... Now remember, this will pull your paint off if you try to peel it out. So just be prepared for it. Now, I push this down like this, right? You see it's not confirmed yet, the position. I'm actually going to fold it slightly, okay? So what that does is that kind of makes it less annoying looking. Now it's on there. I can come in here. Oh, good Lord, those magnets are just strong. Jeez. Look at this. It's just hard to lift. But that's a good thing, guys. I mean, I'm being a pansy, but really it's just hard to lift. So center of gravity is already marked, so all we really have to do is actually put it upside down. And try to pick up the ruler, actually. That's funny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this all the way in and see where it hits. Okay? Come on up here and show them inside of there. You see how there's a plastic bulkhead here before it gets to the motor? You're not actually going to hit the motor. That's good. But the thing is, you don't want to sit here and fiddle with this out in the flying field. The other thing is I'm going to be cutting this out and putting on an XT60. That's my next step. So really all I'm going to do for today is I'm going to take and slip this. Oh, that thing didn't get pulled out. That little piece of Velcro, no big deal. I'm just going to slip this through. And that's going to, these actually slide through, I believe, too. Sometimes they get glued, though. Yep. Okay, so we've got that fairly tight now. So that's going to give us some resistance, and then the rest of the resistance we're going to get from the second one. And as I've mentioned many times, I don't like adding Velcro to my batteries. It's a pain because you have to have them in the same position on all your planes, and it's like it never seems to be on the right side. Okay, so that one's pulled fairly tight too. So now we'll just do a quick test. Remember, if your plane is doing this, it's already crashed, okay? You may go up for a stall turn or something like that where there's some negative G's, but you're typically not flying a plane backward. Now, if it's 3D plane, I realize that could be true. So next step for us is going to be, of course, to put on the XT60 connector, and then this plane is basically going to be done. Let's see if that forward position is going to be a suitable CG location. I usually CG with my gear up, or retracted, if you will. Okay, so I'm on the front mark, and it's basically doable. Now I'm going to go to the back mark, and that's nose heavy. So that means that we're pretty much spot on with a 3,000 milliamp pack all the way up to the bulkhead, or the firewall. And I'm totally satisfied with that. So guys, I'm going to do one more quick clip for you, and then this video is going to be done. And the next thing out of this channel is going to be the maiden flight. Ooh, look at this. It's kind of ugly, guys. See this? Kind of thin here. It looks like this is probably biting into something that's not super strong. You'll want to watch for that on yours. But You see what's happening? Look where my finger is here. I'm trying to put my ring finger down and push, and I'm just pulling like crazy. I have a feeling it's gonna get some major hanger rash on this. So if you guys decide to do something like this, I would highly recommend it. It is a lot easier still yet. And these magnets do tend to get dirty and a little bit less strong over time. If yours is really bad, take a piece of tape and put it over there. It'll still be strong enough to hold, but it's gonna buy you a little bit more gap. So it's gonna weaken the magnetic hold a little bit. All right, guys, we'll pause it and we'll come right back to you when we're doing the XT60. All right, guys, we're continuing our build video here, and we kind of got downstairs, got our soldering iron turned on, pulled the battery out, obviously. And what we're going to do next is we're just going to basically put an XT60 on here, because that's my preferred battery choice. I just want to show you that the ESC can be pulled up, okay? So that's critically helpful when you're trying to work on these things. One of the reasons that I got away from EC3s is this right here. You have to snap them in, and you cannot snap those things back out. And so, for that reason, I decided to just kind of adopt the XT60. And over time, I worked to where pretty much all my XT60s, or all my batteries, were using an XT60 or like a GST or whatever. It's not really that big of a deal either. I've had really good luck with them. So my soldering iron's getting hot. I just use I believe it's a 40 watt iron. Got a little bit of flux, so we'll dip that. And it's a little bit tricky to do this because you're doing it inside of a foam plane, so you got to be careful not to melt everything. Okay, so we got some red and black heat shrink. One of the disadvantages of an XT60, of course, is that you have to insulate the contact area. But if you buy the new XT60s, they have a little cover that you can put around. My experience has been that these type of things are nice, but they do weigh quite a bit, so you'll want to take that into consideration when you're deciding how you want to handle it. Now, obviously, doing the soldering, you want to try to stay away from the edges as much as possible, and you don't want to melt any of this stuff or splatter. The other thing is I'm going to go ahead and put a strip of glue, because we've already confirmed our control surfaces are all going in the correct direction and they're responding to the correct channels, so we're going to get the hot glue gun going as well. Now, the other thing is, when I solder these, I almost always take a male and a female. I slide them together, and then I use my forceps to hold on to the opposite side, and then I can clamp this on, you see, just like that. And what's been working good is I'll take, like something heavy like this, and I put it into the belt clip, and then that's my helping hands. The only problem is I have this upside down, okay? So we'll just flip it around. And the whole idea is that you're going to heat sink. Okay, so we'll start with positive. Now, it doesn't always work good on this because you're dealing with something that's inside of a cavity like this, so we may not be able to do that. Okay, so normally I would try to save some of this so I can make an adapter out of it. But I'm not going to be able to get much out of this. Okay, so that's about as much as I can get. Yes, I probably could use this again if I wanted, but it would be a challenge. And so I have my bag of goodies in here. This is off of an XT90. That's the thing that you can get instead of heat shrink. Just kind of cool to see. Now, you could extend this if you wanted, but I don't typically like to extend these leads at all. You could also pull the ESC completely out. It'd be fairly easy, but I don't want to have to deal with plugging all those wires to the motors back in, or to the motor, to the brushless motor. So I'm just going to come in here and do my wire stripping. Get those out of the way. Now, obviously, if you were doing this on a battery, you'd be a whole lot more careful. This side's not energized, so it's super easy, with the exception of the fact that it's buried in the plane itself. And you can take these heat shrinks and slip them over the ends of your wire at your earliest convenience so that you don't forget to put them on. Except, in this case, I want to probably go ahead and tin the leads a little bit first. And when I say tin the leads, if you're not sure what I mean, that's when you get them hot and you soak some solder in there. I know that's kind of a loose terminology because you're not soaking anything when you solder. But I'm just going to plug this thing in real quick. Make sure it doesn't yank out into my plane. Alright, so the other thing is you want to use a rosin core solder, preferably leaded, unless that's like super hard to get in your country. It works a lot better. It's got a lower rate of failure, in my experience. Looks like the tip is wanting to slip out of my soldering iron. That's always handy. So I need to possibly tighten that a little bit, eh? I don't know if you guys ever switch your soldering tips. I don't do it super often, but when I got to do some really small stuff, I might. Might adjust to a smaller tip. And this one's super easy because you just have one set screw. That's probably the first time I think it's ever come loose like that. Okay, so now we can come in here and get a little bit of solder into there. And you see how that stuff is blown up? I turn my fan on, sucks it through this filter, and I also am going to turn on an exhaust vent. And my exhaust vent is currently venting from over there, so I'm going to pop this out of the ceiling, which means it's going to go out there. Then hopefully won't set off the fire alarm, but if we do, not the end of the world, it's just an annoyance. Okay, so this is how I clean the tip. This thing could probably stand to be replaced. But just all these little steps, not hard, just a lot of them. Okay, so we'll just let that solder bridge between the two elements, what we've got hot and what we're trying to heat. And then at the end of that deal, you should be able to have some solder wick in on its own. Okay, so got a couple of stragglers. That was a little warm. So now that that's been superheated to superhuman temperatures, I'm going to throw some safety glasses on. That probably would have been a better step to do at the beginning. We're going to tidy up the wires a little bit on the red. We bumped into that pretty good, it looks like, with something. A little bit of flux on there. Walk some solder in. Okay, so we've got a pretty good amount of solder on there. You can tell because they're extremely hot when you grab them, of course. And basically, that sucks the nasty, deadly air out of the house. When I say deadly, it's a bit of an exaggeration. Of course, it's leaded, but you would probably need to have a pretty good amount before you actually died from it. It's not good for you. It's a heavy metal. Hard for your body to get rid of a heavy metal once you introduce it. Okay, so obviously this setup isn't going to work so hot for this, but I do want to go ahead and have good purchase on there. I'll go ahead and get just a little bit of flux onto this just to help things flow a little bit easier. I can actually You don't have to grab onto the contact, but it does help dissipate heat a lot. Okay, so I've got the negative side here. I'm on the negative side now. Doesn't really matter which side we do first. Get a little bit of solder, help you bridge your heating element to your work. Get a little bit of solder into there. And while it's easy to control and manipulate, we'll do the positive side a little bit as well. And we're just gonna kind of wet its whistle a little bit. Okay, so now we can come over here and we can get into the actual soldering of the two pieces together. So we're gonna heat the piece that we want to slide in there, and we'll just work them together and let them warm up together for a minute. See, it's wanting to walk away from me. That's not so good. In fact, it's kind of annoying, because then we got a really crappy solder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this set, preferably somewhere where it won't damage anything. Yeah, that's fine there. And then I'm going to grab a little something else that can hold that. Something that won't conduct heat, like maybe a clip like this. This might have a little bit much for retention, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so it's just heavy enough that it kind of puts it where we want it, you know. Flux is always super smoky. Of course, it's designed to burn off at the end there. Now this needs to be held as well. Again, so we'll go ahead and grab onto that. Oh, and it looks like I soldered the wrong end on, guys. I'm surprised nobody said something to me. We'll get that nice and hot. And then we'll just switch to the other side. Okay, it looks like I grabbed the positive side. Doesn't really matter which side you do first, but I happen to have the negative side held, so we'll just try this here. Get it nice and toasty. Sorry, I kind of came out of picture there pretty bad for a second, folks. I apologize for that. So that looks pretty horrible. So we'll come back and readdress that here in a minute when we have the extra help from the black wire. So obviously we're going to have to twist this, so I want to make sure I twist it in a way that's reasonable to work with. Okay, so I'm probably going to hold both wires together actually in this case, if they all stay together. Okay, so I'll just hold them like that, and then I will be able to control it. Most of this stuff is just kind of figuring out how you can hold everything. I want to just keep that smoke down. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, get a little bit of solder in there. Heat the part that you want it to attach to. Get a little heat in the actual solder. Let it cool for a second. And then that joint there will be satisfactory. Now the positive was kind of crappy looking, so I want to kind of rotate this now that we have better control over everything. So I can give it a twist like that now. And I can do this. Then I can get to it actually a little bit easier. I'm going to go grab a second clip like that. And the second clip will actually help hold everything in position. Not that there's a perfect position, just a position. Okay. So the idea is you can minimize grabbing onto this wire really hard, which is going to take that sheath and just rip it off once it heats. Okay. You can grab it a little bit less hard. and still hold the work so you can do your soldering. Okay, so we got the tip mostly cleaned. Won't need much extra solder for this. Okay, so there you have it. So it's soldered. Now we just need to go through the process of going ahead and getting the heat shrink pulled up there. I'm going to just give it a minute to cool. And while we want to let that cool just enough so that we can pull the heat shrink down, we'll go ahead and do this other step, which is going to be using the heat gun, or not the heat gun, the hot glue gun. Okay, now the hot glue gun we'll use to just run one quick bead up and down the servo connectors. And that will make it very difficult for those servo connections to come out accidentally. So that's all you're going to have to do there. If you get impatient with this process, you can try to cool this down, but I wouldn't recommend you do that. It doesn't usually turn out well. I would really like to see a little bit more solder bridging in there. And if you have any doubt, take your time and make sure you don't have a cold solder joint. You can usually tell because it will pool between the gaps. But remember, you can't slide the wires into these. So then we slide these down and we heat them up and we're done. Just like that. Okay? And of course you could take this off and you're ready to rock and roll. So guys, without further ado, I know it's been a pretty simple build, but I really appreciate you letting me be part of it with you. Maiden flight's coming soon. I can't stand to leave this stuff in that last shot. That's just too ugly. AT-6 1.5 meter by Horizon Hobby. E-flite. Beautiful warbird. Scale retracts, scale split flaps. Looks great. Pilot looks good. He looks pretty pissed off about something. He's about to go bomb somebody or shoot him down or whatever they do with this plane. So there we go, guys. Come back for more. Maiden flight coming as soon as we can possibly get it for you. Thanks for watching. Check the description. There's links you can help support our channel there, and we'd appreciate it if you would.